Within the modern Omega Seamaster collection, there are several models that are worthy to take a look at. However, two that are commonly compared are the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter and the Omega Seamaster 300 meter. But which one is actually better? And what's the difference between them? Because that's a pretty confusing name convention. So in this video, I'm going to go through a 10-part checklist comparing these two watches, going through things like price, case finish, movement, and more to help you make the best decision between these two models. So for this video, I'm only going to be looking at these two Omega models. However, if you want a definitive guide on the entire Seamaster collection, I also have a link to that in the description. Complete guide looking at all the different Seamaster families, including the Aquaterra, the Planet Ocean, and even the Seamaster Railmaster, because that technically falls underneath the Seamaster collection. Also, it is important to note that we have complete reviews looking at both of these models independently, so I can also link to those down below. There will be some review components to this video, but it's mostly going to be for the sake of comparing these two watches with one another. So now let's just talk quickly about the differences between these watches when it comes to just their history, and then also what can we do to identify both of the differences between them, because I know the name Seamaster Diver 300 and Seamaster 300, what does this all mean? That doesn't seem like enough of a differentiation in terms of a naming convention. Starting in historically accurate order, the Seamaster 300, which we'll simply call the 300 during this video, is the modern model most closely based on the original 1957 Seamaster Professional, the first from the Seamaster model family to include a rotating bezel. Despite its significant aquatic capabilities, the 300 is positioned as a heritage model and more of a refined, luxurious dress diver, coming in at a more expensive starting price of $6,150 on a strap or $6,500 on a bracelet, now being available in a wide range of different dial colors and variations. Departing from Omega's original Seamaster heritage, the modern Omega diver that receives probably the most fanfare and attention from enthusiasts is going to be the Seamaster Diver 300 meter. Released back in 1993, the Diver 300, as we'll call it here for the rest of the video, presents a diving-oriented but still luxurious watch, complete with a screw-down manual helium release valve, signature wave engraved dial, and a notable James Bond connection, all coming together at an approachable price for this brand at least, at $5,100 on a rubber and $5,400 on its bracelet. For many, this is the gateway watch for Omega in terms of their sports collection. So now with the confusion out of the way, what's the Seamaster 300 versus the Diver 300? Let's look at the 10 different categories, and then also, just so we're all in the same level of understanding, what I'm going to do, go through these categories. For each category, I'm going to give a point to the winner of that category. If it's harder to really establish a true winner for the category, that'll be a tie, and they both will get a point for that category. At the end, we'll total them up, but I'll also at the end interject some of my personal opinion on which one I might prefer and some other takeaways that I'd consider. For categories, we have wearability, optionality, bracelet, bezel, case finish, dial finish and legibility, water resistance, movement, heritage, and then price. So now for our first category, we have wearability. So this is a little subjective, but I would give the win to the Seamaster 300. For case sizes, it's going to wear smaller. So you're looking at a 41 millimeter diameter. Thickness is also going to be at 13.7 millimeters and a lug-to-lug of 47.8 millimeters. Comparing that to the Diver 300 meter, for the most part, same in the thickness department. But the lug-to-lug is going to be extended out. You're looking at 49.7 millimeters here, and then also for the case diameter, 42 millimeters. I would say both of them are going to wear smaller than the case size is going to indicate. For the Seamaster 300, you're looking at closer to, say, a 40 to 40.5 millimeter case on wrist. And then with the Diver 300, I'd say wears closer to a 41 millimeter case on wrist. And of course, you need to consider the inclusion of a helium escape valve on the side of the case for the Diver 300, as that is going to add to the visual or optical presence on the wrist when you look down. You don't really feel it as much in wear, but it does optically just look larger. For our next category, we have optionality, differences between the collection and different variations. And for this, I'd give the nod to the Diver 300. This one is tougher to call because both of the model families actually have a pretty broad selection. The Diver 300 meter though has the edge just because it has 30 variations, and that's not including the chronograph versions, of which there are over 15. If you're really trying to expand out for the 300, it's closer to 25 models, but this is also factoring in models that are of older generations and some limited edition pieces, so probably not as fair. I also would say that for variations, the Diver 300 does a better job in terms of presenting watches and variations that seem to strike a chord with many collectors out there, or at least being a bit more accepted. You look at the No Time to Die watch with James Bond, that seemed to, with its titanium case, really hit it out of the park. You also have the ceramic version, which is pretty unique in its case material. That one still, despite having a more limited audience, does have more staying power and people are a bit more familiar with it. I still think the Diver 300 wins. Now moving on to Bracelet. Although I personally prefer the look and feel of the 300 versus the Diver 300, I don't think there is a meaningful winner, as both have their pros and cons. The 300 has a tapered, more refined bracelet with polished links that will show their scratches, but I'd love to see an all brush version of this. Don't want to get too off topic, but I'd love to see that. On the flip side, the Diver 300 has a predominantly brushed bracelet, but has some unorthodox looks with kind of looking back to the 1990s Brosnan era of Bond. The clasps are both milled and solid with a push button slider. However, they do have this bubbled effect to them that do add some imposing stature to the opposite side of the wrist when you wear them. Not unbearable, but not something that I would say is understated by any means. One other point that I will mention, 21 millimeters with the lug width on the Seamaster 300, and then for the Diver 300, 20 millimeters. And I will say for third-party straps, I think that's going to be helpful, and the Diver 300 looks fantastic with a wide variety of them. I'd almost say that it looks better on a rubber strap than on the bracelet at times, but personal opinion here. For our next category, we have the bezel. So the Diver 300's impressively executed ceramic bezel, I think, is just simply great. The feel of the bezel is also near perfect in operation, offering exceptionally smooth action with little to no play. Also, with earlier versions of the 300, they opted for a ceramic bezel, but now with the new variants from this model family, they utilize a type of anodized aluminum, and Omega claims a special anodizing process that brings up the Vickers hardness rating of 500 on these, so double what you would get from a traditional aluminum insert, but not quite on the level of ceramic that's around 1200 HV on the Vickers hardness scale. I think the notching on the side of the Diver 300 could be a tad better, but I think this one's not as close as some of the other categories. I'd give it to the Diver 300 meter here as a definitive winner. Now moving along to case finish. For the winner here, I'd give it to the 300. To me, it comes across a tad more refined than that of the Diver 300. It has increased facets to the case, thoughtful touches of polishing, and an overall buttoned up feel with its mix of surface finishes compared to the more tool-oriented approach with that Diver 300, which I must say I think is going to be a draw for some, so I don't think you could probably read into this one too much. This is one where it's like, more of a toss-up. Next up, we have dial finish and legibility, and apart from people's take on the handset style, as I assume many will like the broad arrow hands more on the 300, I still think most will agree in giving the nod for just a better finish dial, or more visually entrancing dial, to the Diver 300. Its laser engraved wave dial has become a defining and beloved feature, and its glossy tone is a great balance to the predominantly brushed case. Also, with its lack of foam markings, this helps with the legibility, primarily in the dark with the lume, though the 300 is not far behind and doesn't suffer the same fate as many that opt for tinted superluminova, as it's still exceptional as well. Now moving to water resistance. So both of these watches are equipped with 300 meters of capable water resistance. The inclusion of the helium escape valve on the Diver 300 theoretically adds some utility, but it's only useful for commercial saturation divers living inside a dry helium saturation diving habitat. So I don't think that is going to be a big point here, because 99.999% of people, or even regular divers, are not going to even experience that need to actually utilize that. So for both of these, they're good for pretty much any aquatic activity you throw at them. So I'm gonna give this one more of a tie. So now we have the movement category. This one's a bit easier. this is going to go to the 300. So the main reason for the upcharge with the 300 compared to the Diver 300 is the inclusion of the 8900 series caliber on the inside. The most notable upgrade over the 8800 in the Diver 300 is the non-date 8912 utilized in the 300 has 2 barrels, offering a simply longer power reserve of 60 hours versus 55 hours on the Diver 300. And then more than the additional 5 hours, the dual barrel system also is going to allow for improved isochronism over the life of the power reserve, thanks to a more gradual, continual release of energy from 2 barrels rather than 1 down the gear train. Another notable difference is the quickset function of the second position when moving the crown. The 8800 on the Diver 300 is a quickset date, and at the second position of this 8912, it has that isolated hour hand function that will allow you to go bi-directionally with that isolated hour hand. Since the 300 doesn't have a date, I absolutely love this feature. I've always liked using the 8900 movements. If you have a date, sometimes people will say a little bit arduous when it comes to changing the date if you are many days off from the right time of the month. However, I usually prefer this in most instances, but with a no date, I think it's absolutely the way to go. Both calibers are certified master chronometers approved by Metas that undergo a series of testing over 8 to 10 days, looking at regulation, timekeeping, resistance to magnetic fields, and shock resistance, in addition to other tests, also testing these watches fully cased up. Both calibers also feature a coaxial escapement, a system pioneered by Dr. George Daniels that utilizes 3 pallets rather than the traditional 2-pallet system of a Swiss lever system in order to reduce sliding friction and should lengthen the service interval time. Now, both also offer resistance to 15,000 Gauss and have a spiral wave finish on the rotor and bridges that looks very nice for the price category. But all considered, I think the winner goes to the 300 with its caliber 8912. For our next category, we have Heritage. And for me here, this one was tough because I think you could make a case for both of these watches as being very important, just historically speaking, for Omega in their trajectory. Now with the 300, obviously this one is going to be more in alignment and be inspired by the original 1957 Seamaster and is housed within Omega's Heritage collection. So I think that speaks to what it's going for. That said, I would say the most recognizable design from Omega in the last 30 years, outside of something from the Speedmaster family, has to be the Diver 300. It transformed Omega in the 1990s and has become a symbol of their now decades-long connection with James Bond. So I give both of these a point in the Heritage department. So now for the final point, we have price. And this is going to be a big one for many people. And with the price of the Seamaster 300 going to be a full $1,000 more on the bracelet compared to that of the Diver 300, I think this is going to be a big factor that some will consider. You're talking about, nice jump up in price, and on the surface, it can be challenging at times why there's such this difference in price. A big reason is going to be the movement on the inside and some of the other aspects I mentioned earlier, but a big reason definitely going to be the movement. But simply put, price here, the Diver 300 wins. So now that we've gone through all of these different points, let's just tally up the totals. So for the Seamaster 300, it had 6 points that it accumulated throughout this list. And then you have the Seamaster Diver 300, it got 7 points. So one got 7, one got 6. So the Seamaster Diver 300 is just definitively better. It's just the better watch. Well, yes and no. I do think that the Diver 300, in terms of its positioning in the marketplace, is probably a better positioned watch compared to the Seamaster 300, with being at $1,100 less, being closer to that of the Black Bay category than it is getting closer to the Submariner. I think it is just very well positioned in the marketplace, but I still think the Seamaster 300 is as well. For my own personal taste, I do like the Seamaster 300 more, but I would say for the majority of people out there, the Seamaster Diver 300 is probably going to be the more chosen option. And you can look at the sales numbers from Omega, look at people's wrists. That's pretty true across the board. I think it does get a little edge here because of that price gap, and I think that makes sense. But hopefully this video is helpful. If you guys want more videos like this, doing these side-by-side comparisons and kind of really trying to break these things down, I can absolutely do this. This was kind of a different way of approaching this, and I know many people are confused about the differences between the Seamaster 300, Diver 300. This language is just, it's kind of silly in terms of how Omega has positioned these watches, but wanted to try to help guide people into making this buying buying decision. But all right, guys, that is kind of a new format here, trying to break down these two watches really from these different categories and trying to really kind of at the end as a more definitive way of looking at different comparisons and buying decisions out there in the market. If you like this style of video, please give it a thumbs up. That's a great indicator for me that you want to see more of this style of content in the future. If you also have different watches out there that you'd like us to do these style of comparisons with, also leave a comment down below so that we can see that and see what you would want to kind of look at compared with one another. Also be sure to check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the new products that we offer. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.